Hello aviators, my name is Chris Palmer from Angle of Attack. This is another Motivation Monday Q&A. So your questions, answers from me on your flight training questions, your aviation career questions, different technical topics, fun questions, everything aviation related, directed toward helping you progress toward a fun time in aviation, whether you're just going to do it recreationally or if you want to make an aviation career out of this. This is a live stream that I do for everyone every week. This is the recording here on YouTube. You can find the description down below, the different questions that we have throughout this stream today, and that will jump you to that question, so that's really helpful. This isn't the only recording. You're also going to find other recordings of Motivation Monday if you go to the playlist, and you can see lots of different questions that people have asked that can be helpful to you, because likely you have similar questions and similar challenges to what other people are going through. So hope you enjoy this today. Make sure to subscribe if you're new here at Angle of Attack. We share lots of information that can help you in your aviation path, your aviation journey. Make sure to turn on that notification bell as well. Also like this and join in on the conversation while you're watching this. Let me know how you feel about the answer to the question, and would love to hear your comments and interact with you. So keep it up. Enjoy this Motivation Monday and the questions that were asked, and I'll see you on the inside right here, right now. Here's an interesting one. Important tips for a flight instructor check ride. So I always say that when you go into a flight instructor check ride, the biggest thing is that you are going to be role-playing as if the DPE is the student, and so you need to be approaching it from that perspective that you are going to be teaching the DPE, and make sure that you are just totally all in on that role-playing experience that you will have with the DPE, and be the teacher that is good, be a coach, whatever it is. Be a quality teacher, and that's going to be the best thing you can do during your check ride, whether that's during the oral portion or on the actual flight. Now, there are some administrative things that, of course, you're going to know and have to know pretty well during the CFI check ride, like the endorsements and paperwork and all those other things you need to know as an instructor. So make sure that you're up to snuff on those things. You should be. That's a big part of this check ride. But again, realize that the biggest part of the check ride is going in and role-playing as if you are the instructor. That's what you're being tested on, and the DPE is the student. So just keep that in mind. How do you incorporate the student into a lesson plan and teaching guide? So it's really important for the student to know where you're at. And I don't necessarily have like a specific, I guess, sheet that I hand to my student. I basically say, this is what we're going to be covering in the next lesson, so study on that, and this is what we're going to be studying next time, or whatever. I remind them in our brief or debrief what we're going to be doing, and it is always clear where we're moving. I kind of do that in not only the present sense, like what are we going to be working on next, but I always like my students to know where we're moving to over the next week or several weeks, so they have a bit of an idea how things are going to work. I think that just gives people a little bit more confidence, I guess, as they're working through the steps that can seem mundane during training, to where they are, saying, yeah, we're on track. May not feel like I'm making a lot of progress, but we're on track, and this is the goal we're working towards. So I do like to have mile markers in the training for my students, and then, of course, sharing with them what we're going to be covering at different times in the training. Of course, when that starts to come to flight planning, that becomes a lot heavier there. And, a lot of it in the very beginning is quite simple, because I want my students to come in having already done their ground school, their online ground school. And a lot of them do with me, because I have an online ground school at angleofattack.com, so they'll get that done. And so they have a lot of knowledge already, and now we're just applying that to the actual flying, to the airplane, and finding out what's different between the books and what's real world. So that's kind of the process I go through there with my students, and I think it works pretty well. And then I also adjust it toward their learning needs as well. Struggling to learn the E6B and make flight plans. Any advice? So good looking Good looking, good cooking hippie. I always like that username. He's a regular. Okay, so we're in this new world that's a little bit interesting because there's the old school way of flight planning, right? You have your sectional charts, you have your E6B, you have your plotter, and your paper sheet flight plan, and you go through all those different steps, and you can do all that math manually and do it with your E6B. I think the best way, honestly, there's a little manual that comes with the E6B, and there's going to be 5 things you do like all the time. And those things are basically first of all, how you correct your heading is the biggest one for the eventual heading that you're actually going to fly. And you actually see a cheat sheet on most E6Bs now on the back that gives you a step-by-step process right above the wind correction angle wheel. I'm not sure if that's the official name, but you'll see the step-by-step process there. And following that meticulously to get your headings down is really, really helpful. I still refer to that constantly whenever I'm using the E6B. And then that little manual that comes with the E6B, those other things that you're going to use often, like fuel calculations and guesstimating things, that's a great thing to do there, okay? Just getting in there and finding out how to do it and then doing it by repetition. So that's definitely the old school way, and I definitely think that it's good to use the E6B and learn it and learn where everything came from, because I kind of compare it to my photography, right? I like photography. You can see it on my Instagram here. I really like shooting pictures and sharing pictures. So at one time I was shooting film, and it was kind of at the tail end of the film photography, the film SLR photography. So I actually, I did darkroom stuff even in high school. I'm sure I was one of the last students to go through that. But now everything's digital. And so my comparison there is that everything you're doing with an E6B is manual, and now everything we're doing in aviation is going digital. So I am a big proponent of learning that old style so you know where things came from, but also simplifying things, bringing that into ForeFlight, where you have a very powerful flight planning platform, and you plan there. Lots of different tools there to do that. Not only when you flight plan does it figure out those headings and everything based on the winds automatically, but you can actually put 2 fingers on the map, and it gives you kind of a lot of the information that you'd get from an E6B anyway. It gives you distance, direction, time, fuel burn, and you can kind of pinch zoom where you want to go from A to B, and it will do that for you. So I think we have to look to the future as well, and also looking to the past on what that information can give us. So I hope that you're thinking about what you're going to be using in the future, because it's likely going to be something like ForeFlight, and start to get familiar with that as well. But I wish you luck in learning the E6B. It just takes repetition, and I hope that helps you. All right. Thanks. Good question, as always, and great username. So, hi, Chris. What's your process to determine a VFR flight is a, I'm gonna guess that this is a go or a no-go. So as pilots, we do a lot of flight planning. It's a major part, if not the most major part of our training when it comes to the knowledge component of what we learn. So if you think about it, an airplane was made to go somewhere, right? We're going from point A to point B, and maybe even going from B to C or C to D throughout one day. And we as pilots have to flight plan that entire thing. We have to figure out not only the navigational components of how we're going to get there and figuring out our headings and times and fuel and weight and balance, but we need to know about the weather and if that's going to be conducive for a good flight today. So there are a bunch of different things we go through as a pilot to think about and consider. And then we come to this point where we say, okay, based on my skill level, based on the aircraft, based on today and its information, and based on what's available, is today a good idea to fly? And we call that the go, no-go decision. Are we going to go or are we not going to go? The dangerous thing to do would be to say, okay, I'm going to assume that I'm going to go all the time, and I'm going to try to go all the time. I think we can really get ourselves into some traps there by approaching this in that way, because what ends up happening is we try to convince ourselves that things are good enough to go, and we're more trying to use the information to convince us out of going. So I like to take more of a neutral approach to really looking at the data and the information and what we have in front of us, and going from there, and then looking holistically even at the other things that we do, like are we pressured to get somewhere right now? Do we have family or an employer or friends or whatever it is pressuring us to get somewhere? We call those external pressures. Do we have to be at that location for something? You know, for me as a pilot, there are times that I actually choose not to fly because I absolutely have to be at an event. Because what happens if you have to be somewhere, then a lot of the decision making starts to go out the door and you aren't making a neutral go, no go decision. So that's a little bit of the thought process I go through. Of course, a lot of the actual where I end up on my go, no go decisions depends on my actual skill level. You know, I'm fairly confident in doing cross country flights and even dealing with some weather, but that's just a kind of a generality. I always look at everything. I'm the type of person that always calls up flight service and talks to them about the route as well. And that's just how I am. And I try to look at things neutral at the end of the day. I try to stack things in my favor. And when it's really not good, you need to have the courage to say no, that we're not going to go, that we're going to wait it out, or we're going to reschedule or cancel altogether. Whatever it is, you need to have the courage to just across the board stop and do something different. Okay, so that's the go decision. It's a difficult one sometimes, depending on the pressures you have. Some pressure's okay, too much is a little, you got to be super careful with that. So just think of it that way. Look at it holistically, especially look at the mental, emotional components of it, where people are wanting you to fly and you need to fly and you need to be somewhere, because that can be kind of dangerous. Okay, so there you go. Hope that answers your question. Great question. I like talking about that topic. Okay, here's an interesting question. What plan do you recommend for a rusty IFR commercial pilot to get back in the cockpit without breaking the bank account? That's interesting. So you've got your commercial and you've got your instrument, and it was very similar for me when I was out of aviation for several years. I think the best thing to do is to start from square one and take nothing for granted. Go and simply find an instructor that's local, a good instructor that's well recommended, and start the flight review process. So the flight review, of course, is something that you have to do every 2 years. But you know, if it's been 10 years since you've flown, you still have to do the flight review and get back up to snuff. So you've got to get back up to snuff on just the flying of the airplane, the skills of the airplane first, the basic maneuvers, the stalling, the attitude, the landings, all that stuff. Okay, you got to start square one. Start with all those things. Start with the regulations again and the basic things you need to know to stay legal and stay safe. Start there. Okay, start at the private pilot level, even though you're commercial instrument. And then you can start to think of maybe commercial level proficiency again. So starting to get into the steep turns and the performance maneuvers like chandelles and lazy eights. You could even get into the eights on pylons, which is another fun one. So start to get into the commercial stuff, and then talk about getting into the instrument. Now, when it comes to the instrument, I think probably one of the best ways to not hit your bank account is to use a simulator. Now, of course, today I actually have a simulator behind me. This is called a Redbird simulator. It's an advanced aviation training device, or an AATD. You can log time in this thing. You can get proficient in this thing. I'm planning on spending a little bit of time in it this afternoon myself, not only for me to stay proficient, but with a client. So these are fantastic devices that are affordable, and you can repeat those things in the instrument that are very helpful. But to just dive in the instrument right away, I don't think is going to be very helpful for you, and it's not really going to do much. You're just going to end up spinning your wheels too much. But if you can find a way to get proficient in the other things first and go on several flights with an instructor, and just get proficient with that stuff, and then go up on your own and do pattern work, that sort of thing. Break the ice and go on a small cross country, like, even if it's only 50 nautical miles minimum, do that. You're starting to break the ice on all those old things and start to get your confidence back again, and then you can work into something like a simulator. And maybe from there, if you haven't broken the bank account yet, you could go up for an actual instrument flight and talk to actual ATC. This has emulated ATC that are real people and online, but that's something you can do there. Anyway, a handful of different things to do, but you got to really get back into just the proficiency of being a pilot again and the basic skills first. I think you always have to start with the foundational elements and then build up from there. I'm considering switching instructors. Will this cause much of a setback in my training? So think of it two different ways. So you've got, you can keep going one way with an instructor that you don't feel is working, okay? And you can beat your head against a wall and you're not getting along and it's not really going anywhere. Or you can switch instructors to someone that is better, and then, you might have 2, 3, 4 hours where you're getting to know each other, but then it could really get into a better rhythm, which is what you're trying to get after by switching instructors. And over the long term, it's going to be better than just sticking with one person. So yes, can cause a little bit of a setback. The biggest reason for that is just because that new instructor really needs to understand who you are. As an instructor myself, if I know that someone has switched an instructor, I'm a little bit cautious, because I really hope that that person wasn't just like blaming the instructor and the difficulties they were having on the instructor and saying it was them and bailing. So I'm a little bit cautious. I don't want to make sure that there aren't any hazardous attitudes when I fly with someone new that's been in that situation. Just have some red flags. You could even call them pink flags. I don't know. But I just have some flags that kind of go off there that just makes you a little bit more cautious, that I want to fly with this person and really understand where they're at. And once you understand where they're at, you can build from there. So as an instructor, that's kind of my perspective. That's going to be what you do. You guys need to get to know each other. You're going to need to demonstrate the things that you've learned already, and that's going to take a handful of flights to do. And then you can get right into it and pick up where you left off. So, if it's not working, remember that you are the boss and you get to hire and fire your instructor. I hope you don't just toss your instructor aside if they're really working hard and trying. But if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. But also take personal accountability if you can for your own learning, and you should be anyway, but make sure that you're trying to do your best. And if you are doing your best and it really is not a fit, then of course, maybe a different instructor is the best thing to do. So that's my advice. Felicia asks, I'm due to solo soon. Any advice? Relax, okay? The big thing about soloing for the first time is you're pretty new to the flying thing. You may have been studying for a while and everything, but you're pretty new to the flying thing, and there's a lot of apprehension there. There's like the fright of, or the fear of talking to air traffic control or your local radio or whatever it is. There's this fear that you can't actually do or fly, or you can't actually fly the airplane well. So your instructor is not going to let you go solo until you're ready, until you're really ready. And they put you through some paces to even get yourself out of some situations if you need to. So just go in with a little bit of confidence, okay, that your instructor wouldn't sign you off for this unless you were actually ready. And then just take a deep breath, do things how you were trained, and everything will be great. And it's a huge confidence booster from there. At the end of the day, you're an aviator, and you've been taught to do things a certain way. Go and do them that way, and you'll do great. It's as simple as that, okay? I don't think we need to overthink the solo thing. It is kind of a cool benchmark of where we are, but then it's time to move forward. And from there, you're going to be moving forward into your cross-country training. It's going to be a lot of fun. So this is just a step. Enjoy it. First of many solo flights. And then you can celebrate after you've done that. So hope that helps. Good question, Felicia. Thank you. Any tips on feeling nauseous under the hood first time and felt a little nauseous? Does this get better with time? Absolutely. If you've just done one flight under the hood and you got a little nauseous, then good, because a lot of people might get a lot nauseous. So don't worry so much about that. Be communicative with your instructor, because if you get too nauseous, you really don't want to get to the point where you lose your cookies or toss your cookies, as Bob Hoover would say. You really don't want to get too far down the road, so just be cautious about that. But here's what's going on. So you've got all these things in your head and in your body that your entire life, from the time you were a newborn all the way until now, we're teaching you how to remain upright, how to keep your balance, how to, catch yourself from a stumble, which way you're turning, acceleration and deceleration, all of these things that we feel not only with the kinesthetic sense of our body, our whole body, but with our inner ears. Our eyes tell us certain things, and we're breaking a lot of those things when we do instrument. We're removing our biggest sensory, our biggest sense, which is our vision, from that component. Then our body tries to rely on the things that are in our body, like our inner ears and our, everything else, even the fluids within our stomach. That's a lot of what actually kind of gets you if you're feeling nauseous. I'll tell you about that in a second. And then you have too much emphasis on that body stuff, and then it's confused because this isn't on the ground anymore. Now we're in the air, and all the senses are different. So that's what you're feeling. It's actually better, talking about the belly and nauseousness, it's actually better to have eaten before a flight some solid foods, to have something in your belly, because actually part of nausea is the sloshing of your belly fluids back and forth, believe it or not. And that's kind of an old fisherman thing, is it's actually good to have a nice big breakfast before you go. Of course, if you're really susceptible to throwing up, then that might be an issue. But people eventually get over this. And the fact that you're only feeling it a little bit is good, because it means that with more work and more practice, it's like a muscle. Your body will get used to it. You will get over it. So that's how your body's interacting in instrument conditions. That's why you're learning instruments, is because you need to be relying on the instruments and not your body. That's the entire reason why instruments are a thing. Otherwise, if in a magical alternate universe, our bodies would know which way was right side up if we were in the air, and we wouldn't need an attitude indicator. But those things are so important, because you'll be in situations in IFR where your body will be lying to you and saying, hey, we're turning left. And you look at the instruments and you're trained to know, oh, actually, I'm looking at the instruments, we're turning right. I need to trust those. This actually came up in the Kobe Bryant accident recently, disorientation. That's exactly what I'm talking about here. So anyway, keep at it. Keep at the instrument training. You got this, and just keep working that muscle to get over it. Thoughts on chair flying. I'm a huge fan of chair flying. So what is chair flying? I'm sitting in a chair today, okay? Of course, I'm not like on my knees or anything, or floating in space. Anyway, whatever. So chair flying is when you are pretending to go through certain procedures when you're just sitting in the chair. It's the cheapest way to practice. You've got your checklist. You pretend that you have the cockpit in front of you. You could even get a cockpit poster. You could even get really creative and take all those Amazon boxes that you have and draw on them with a Sharpie where things are in the cockpit, okay? If you have like things down between you and your instructor, like a fuel switch or something, you can draw everything out. So then you can go through the procedures of what you would do. Then you can get really creative. If you can really get into the mindset of chair flying, you can actually go through traffic pattern work and the things you'll touch and what you'll be looking for and the speeds and everything. And that repetition is really going to help when you go back to the airplane. So if you're struggling with something, or you just want to really nail certain procedures, this is one of the best ways to do it, especially emergency procedures. Pretty much everyone should be doing this for emergency procedures, because they are memory items. During certain emergencies, you really need to know just where to go and what to do right away. And then you bring out the checklist if you have time. Not that emergencies happen often, they don't, but we prepare for them. That's part of flight training. So, chair flying is absolutely awesome. I definitely recommend it, and yeah, go for it. It's a great way to stay ahead and keep ahead. Okay, best way to study before you start your private pilot license. So, the biggest part of learning to fly is not how to fly the airplane. It's not anything else other than the knowledge. There is a lot to learn when it comes to this new world you're in, this new industry you're in. We've got air traffic control to deal with. We've got these engineered airplanes that are made a specific way, and a bunch of knowledge that goes into knowing what those are. We've got certain procedures. We've got weather. We've got flight planning and navigation. We've got communications. The list goes on and on and on, right? So starting with knowledge first is so important before you actually start your license. And it's one of the cheapest ways to start, because what you do is you say, okay, I'm interested in this pilot thing. I want to save money throughout the process and or be the best student and just really be on the ball. What is within my control to do that? Well, it is totally within your control, and that is to study hard and learn, and there are many, many resources out there to do that. So here at Angle of Attack, I have an online ground school. I'm really proud of it. It's 25, 30 hours long. I also have instrument ground school. You start with the knowledge first. You build that up, you learn about all that you can, and then once you've done that, you've even passed what we call the written test, you go and you start your training. If you do it this way, what happens is you'll go and you'll step in that airplane with the instructor for the first time. Maybe before you even step in the airplane, you'll have your briefing on the ground, and he or she will ask, what is airspeed and what is lift, and how do we control the airplane? What are their control surfaces? And guess what? You know it. You're not hearing these things for the first time. So then you go out to the airplane and you can start to be a little bit ahead of everyone else because you already know some of those things, and you can start to do the procedures quicker, and things are entering your mind quicker. That mind goes to the hands and everything else that's controlling the airplane, your feet too, okay? We control the rudder and the brakes with their feet. So you start there. You start with the knowledge. Everything flows all the way through to your pilot training, and that's fantastic. If you don't do that knowledge, then you show up to that first lesson. Oh, I don't know what the flight controls are. I don't really know what lift is. I don't really know how an airplane turns. I don't really know what makes us go up and down. And that, that's kind of a fun thing to kind of be in this brand new canvas, right? But you're not going to save money that way. Your instructor is going to have to charge you for all that time that he or she teaches you about those things. And you're not really going to be on top of the airplane when you get in it, because you're going to be hearing all this vocabulary for the first time and see all these things and runways and signs and people and airplanes, and your mind's going to be too overloaded. So you can do a lot before you actually get in an airplane. So that's definitely what I recommend, what I want my students to do before they show up. It's actually a requirement of mine. Get your written test done before you show up, and then we move forward from there. We're off to the races quickly. We get them done in the minimum amount of time possible for their license. Of course, if they need more time just for their specific learning, that's okay. But we're being efficient about what we're doing, and that is the cheapest way, the most effective way if you're not worried about money to do your training. So I hope that helped. Favorite flights in Alaska? I have a flight school in Alaska, for those of you that didn't know. I work a lot kind of in the middle, south middle, central of Alaska is what we call it. So I'm in Homer, south central, down on the coast. So I work all the way up to Talkeetna. I've been as far as Fairbanks on a regular basis. And I've even been up to Bettles, which is above the Arctic Circle. That was a fantastic flight. I like Talkeetna a lot because Denali is right there, the biggest mountain in North America. And they say the tallest mountain. But then people say that actually the mountain in Hawaii is the biggest because the seafloor. Anyway, Denali is a massive mountain. It's beautiful to fly around, a beautiful area. I really like flying out of Homer. We have some glaciers and some ice fields just right outside of Homer. The coastline is absolutely beautiful. So I can't say enough about the beauty around there and the variety. I really love it. And, I'm in California right now, taking a little break from the Alaskan winter. And, it's beautiful everywhere. I love flying everywhere. We might be taking a trip to Japan, and just the thought of maybe flying in Japan, we'll see if it pans out, it's just fascinating to me. I just think that everywhere we are, no matter where you are, we should really be looking for these unique opportunities and these unique places to see from the air, and really kind of shrink our world in a way. We as pilots get to do that, and you can get to somewhere really cool fast and see things that other people don't get to see, even from an airliner, because we get to be down closer to it in general aviation airplanes. So yeah, lots of great flights in Alaska. I can't complain there, but I also encourage you guys to look in your own backyard. There's so much cool stuff to do. Please advise on how to keep track of what Part 140 or what Part 61 school charge you, how hours and minutes are calculated, when start and end, et cetera, et cetera. So that this is more along the lines of, I guess you're asking, how do I know where every expense is coming from, where it's coming from? And if you can't have whoever is doing a service for you, it doesn't matter if it's flight training or anyone else. I mean, gosh, if someone's selling you toothpaste by bulk, I don't know. You need to know where every single charge is coming from. So if that school can't articulate that, then you really need to get after them. I know that I can articulate it very quickly to my students, and I make it very clear every time I do billing. We're charging for this much time in the air, and that's airplane time too, my time, and this much time on the ground. That's what we're charging for. Here's the taxes. So I'm very, very careful in that. So if they can't articulate it, you need to get after them and get a list of how they're charging. Don't just throw money at someone for no reason, okay? I'm not sure what's going on there, but go ahead and do that. Tips on how far to let a student take a mistake. Is it kind of a feel thing? I think it is a feel thing to a certain extent. Remember that things are moving much slower for you than they are for the student. Everything's moving faster for the student. They think everything's critical. For you, you know that it can go a little bit further. And it's important to let them make mistakes, but I also wouldn't let them make the mistake repeatedly. I let them make mistakes, and then if I see them do it again, it's like, why are you doing that? Or is that something you need to be doing? Or did we talk about that? Or whatever it is, in whatever context. Make sure that they're not forming a habit from you just letting them let something go, okay? But, I'll let certain things go a little bit longer so that they can see the effect of that. If they're trying to do a power on stall and they're not perfectly coordinated, if they go into that stall and the wing starts to dip, we're not anywhere near a spin, but they're going to see why it's important and why coordination is important. That scares people sometimes because it goes pretty steep to the side and the airplane's still flying just perfectly fine, but that can startle people too. It doesn't really startle me because I know that we just still reduce the angle of attack and then roll the wings level, but then it ends up being a good lesson right away. So things like that, yeah, just judge by feel and be careful. Make sure that they never are allowed to do anything that's inherently dangerous, and you fix those things. That's why you're there. So yeah, it's a case-by-case basis of what you're going to do. How big of a demand is there for A&Ps right now? I think there's quite a big one. We have a fairly healthy aviation industry right now. We have a lot of pilots entering the industry. We have a lot of flight schools that are popping up because there is a demand for pilot training right now. So I think there's actually quite a big demand for it. There also seems to be more of an older generation of mechanics, and so I think we're seeing that generation age a little bit now, and it could definitely use new blood. So anyone that is trying to go after their A&P and get into the industry, I very much encourage it. If you can do both, if somehow you can do A&P and the pilot thing, then your employment opportunities, especially for really cool jobs, open up big time. I know a lot of people in Alaska really like the combination of those licenses. So, yeah, it's definitely something that I think is great to do. I kind of wish I would have done it. I think it's a little bit late now in my career. Plus, I'm doing angle of attack here. I think that's a valid effort and worth putting all my time into. So yeah, I think A&P is great. Go for it. There's definitely a demand out there. What rating could I get from your school? We do private and commercial right now. We're getting our airplane up to snuff for instrument. So while I can teach instruments, I'm certificated to teach instruments. I can't do it yet because we just don't have an IFR equipped airplane, but I'm hoping to change that this year. So I've got some students that I'm going to be taking all the way through theoretically. So we're really looking at upgrading that soon. What materials would you advise a CPL student to use while studying for their CPL exams? And I'm not sure, when you say CPL, I'm not sure if you're talking about a foreign commercial pilot license. Here in the US, I always start with the standard books. I like ASA. I start there and then I work my way through and work with an instructor and add everything on there. I watch videos on YouTube. I do ground school. So whatever it is, I really try to go all in and just get a bunch of different sources of information. That's what you got to do. So pretty simple, but also you got to just be on top of it and make sure you get all the information you can. Is it possible to work toward a commercial pilot license while working full time? Yes, many people have done it before. It's slower going, but you may come out the other side without having any debt. And yeah, it's absolutely possible, totally possible. Just make sure you have a good plan. You're disciplined. You're not binging on Netflix like other people do. You're putting that extra time toward aviation, and it's definitely possible. We have a lot of time on our sides, okay? So make sure you use it wisely and really dig into those goals if that is in fact your plan. Another question, best way to prepare for the private pilot oral. So the best way to prepare is first realize that it's not an interrogation. You're going to go in and it's going to be a conversation about certain scenarios, and those scenarios just happen to present the things that you need to know as a pilot, whatever level you're at. I guess it's a private pilot, but whatever level you're at, those things you need to know as a pilot to be safe, to keep the regulations, to make good decisions, and that's what they are looking for in the oral exam. I go through that quite a bit in my Check Ride Ace course. So Check Ride Ace is a course on my website, angleofattack.com, that goes through and talks about this process in more depth about what I just talked about. It also does a study guide. I have a study guide there. I think the best part of Check Ride Ace is the study guide. It's over 20 pages, and you go in and fill in the things that you need to know for the oral exam as kind of just a rehash of the information, because if you follow my advice and you do the written test first, it's going to be a while since you've done the knowledge component, so you need to catch up on that. So I do it in a flow, in a way that you're basically going to be doing your oral exam, and that's called the PAVE checklist. So the whole study guide will build you and get you ready for that oral exam. I have that for private, instrument, and commercial. Kind of following that up, how do you stay motivated when you didn't pass an exam the first time? So a couple different ways to approach this. I'm not sure which exam you're talking about. If you're talking about like the written exam, or you're talking about the actual check ride. But I think whenever something like this happens, we really need to be careful to take personal accountability for why we were not prepared. Because really it's only you that can fix this at the end of the day. So whatever your shortcoming was, you need to find out how you can improve that, and whether you demand a new process from your instructor or whatever, you can go into that process right away, okay? And really be honest about that component, and if it's your fault. And it most likely is, because it's you here doing it. So there's two different ways to look at it. Sometimes it's just a couple things you need to tweak, and you don't really need to do anything big and brash. But if you're really short, like let's say we're just talking written exam. I kind of have a feeling we're talking check ride, but let's just say we're talking written exam. It takes a 70 to pass. I think that mid 80s is kind of minimum. That's where you want to be. Low 90s when you're practicing your test is really where you should be before you ever try to attempt it. But sometimes I see people going through study for a written exam, and they never take practice tests. They somehow get an endorsement, and then they just go take a test, and they don't have a process to go through it. And that always bugged me a little bit because they had no idea if they could pass the test or not. And when it comes to aviation, when it comes to these written tests, honestly, even when it comes to the check rides, there's really not a lot of question marks. We have everything right in front of us that can help us through that process. We have the textbooks, the online ground school that can really teach us the knowledge. Then we have online practice tests that show us where that knowledge is at with the actual questions from the test. And so we should know where we're at all times. That should reveal deficiencies in our training, and then we study those things. And then there is the check ride side where, if you're deficient in some area, you need to practice more. You need to learn that in more depth. And so it's very clear, I think, what you need to do, especially since for the check ride, we have the ACS, the Airman Certification Standards, that lays out exactly what you need to know. There are no question marks. They're basically giving you the answers for the tests, and you just need to get up to snuff to pass it, okay? So that's kind of my perspective on this. So I think going back to the word motivated in this particular question, you'll find the motivation and the confidence in knowing that you're doing the real stuff and the real questions, and that you know that you can pass it before you even go into it. Because really, you should already have been scoring on practice tests in the low 90s for your written exam, and for the check ride, you should have done a mock oral or several and a mock check ride to know that all your procedures, all your everything, maneuvers, procedures, everything is up to snuff for the actual check ride. So there's really not a lot of question marks. I mean, that's what instructors should do. They should get rid of all those things. Okay, this is kind of a cool question, something out of left field that we haven't really talked about yet. Any golden rule to master good landings on different terrain and aircraft types? Aircraft types is a little bit different because some airplanes land with a little bit of power in a very shallow angle. Some airplanes land better in a stall. So it's hard to really say that, but the idea the idea for a good landing is to show up at a good speed with not too much energy, not too little energy at the landing location. So we got to start there regardless of what airplane you're in. So you can't be too fast, you can't be too slow, you got to be on target, you got to manage your energy. I say that a lot in training. And I think one of the quickest ways to learn the management of energy in an airplane, if appropriate for that aircraft type, is to do power off 180 landings. So you get a beam, your touchdown point, and you do the power off. Basically means you're rolling the power to idle. You're not actually turning the engine off, and then you're drifting down. You learn the regime of the airplane and its characteristics very quickly that way. In quick repetition, and ends up being really helpful for smooth landings. Because then when you add on top of that the addition of power and you being able to stretch that out and slow things down a little bit more, you should have pretty decent landings from then on out. Also, basic air work is really important, again, if appropriate for aircraft type. Doing stalls, steep turns, slow flight, those sorts of things are really helpful, just to know how the airplane is moving and what your control feel is like on that final approach and landing. And then knowing where to look is very important for the different airplanes that you move around to. Some dashes are higher or lower than others. That helps with your visual perception of where you're going. Cockpits and the way they are angled are different in airplanes. So you really need to kind of know where you're looking. And once you find that picture that gets you a really good smooth landing, then that's kind of what you're looking for every time, is you're coming down to that place where you're on target, on energy, etc. And then you're looking for that. You're finishing, keeping your eyes down the runway, holding the airplane off, touching down, finishing the landing with work to keep the nose wheel on center line, etc., etc. All right, so that's just some fun ideas on that one. Another question, is it ever too late to become a pilot? No, it's not. I have an instructor of mine who had a 99-year-old student who turned 100 years old. I'm not sure what the status ever ended up being about that. I'm not sure that guy got his license, but he was still mentally sharp and actually doing pretty well. So no, it's never too late. Of course, that would be far too late for the airlines, but you know, I want to encourage you just really quickly. I think we just keep this question short, this answer short. I want to encourage you to not ask this question too much. Don't ask this question next year. Don't ask it in 3 years. Don't ask it in 5. It will be too late someday, at least for a career. So just go for it. Like, if you want to be a pilot, figure it out. Make life changes. Figure it out. Like, you can do it. A lot of people have. So do it now, because otherwise that question just keeps coming. Hey, is it too late? I waited too long again. Is it too late? I waited too long again. Is it too late? And you know, there are people that I've talked to through Angle of Attack, fans and other people from the community that wrote that they were close to finishing their license when they were 17 years old or 18 years old, and that was 30 years ago, and now they're getting back into it, but they forgot everything and everything's changed. And I mean, gosh, you know, I always say that becoming a pilot is makes you a better person. It really does, because it does take a lot of hard work. But if you want to do this, do it. Figure it out, do it, make the decision, go for it, and ask, what can I do as the best next step is the best question, rather than is it ever too late? Because is it ever too late? It just feels a little bit resigned to me. Not trying to be hard on you or anything. I really hope that you go for this and you figure this out, but just think of it that way. At some point, it could be too late. I am going to wrap this up now. I really appreciate you guys being here. If you want to check out these recordings of Motivation Monday, this Q&A session that I do live, please go to YouTube. I release these recordings every Monday. So there's not going to be one today because I didn't do one last week, but there are 8 others. I actually did release one last week, but on Monday, so you can see the recording of that from the week prior. But I released these all on YouTube, so you can go back and see the many questions that we've gone through. Everything is searchable there in the description, so you'll see the question that may apply to you. You click the time code, and that'll actually bring up that time in the timeline, so it's very helpful there. Of course, if you go to YouTube, like, subscribe, share, turn on the notification bell, be part of the community, trying to grow my YouTube. And just really like the community interaction and giving back, and that's why I do this every Monday now. So I hope you guys are enjoying it, and kind of, you know, building off of that last question, go out there and get it. Like, figure out how you are going to take the next step in your aviation career and make this happen. It's very unique to you because you have unique challenges, you have unique relationships, you have a unique past, and at the end of the day, the biggest thing that comes up is just that passion for aviation, which I know you have, that hard work, which you really need, and then when things get tough, you need that determination. So passion, hard work, determination, PhD, and that'll get you through it. All right, if you ever have any questions outside of these live chats, feel free to direct message me. And happy to be here and happy to be in community with you. I will talk to you guys soon. Until next time, throttle on.